I'm Sravish. This is Trust Talks, and today I have with me Dan Walsh, Chief Information Security Officer at VillageMD, and who I believe should be a character actor in the movies instead of being a CISO. Dan, thank you so much for joining us on Trust Talks today.
Thank you, and I won't hold your poor movie taste against you.
Dan, I think you have the face and the intellect to be in the movies, so we should have a conversation around how we can make that happen.
My mother always thought I had a face for radio, so we'll leave it at that.
I would love for you to share with everybody, what does trust mean to you as a Chief Information Security Officer, and what does it mean to you as a colleague in your company?
So I actually have an acronym for trust. So I think trust stands for a few things. The first thing trust stands for is transparency. You know, as a manager, can you be transparent with your people? Probably not with everything, but when it comes to the things that matter to them, in terms of direction, in terms of accountability, I think that that's core. As a colleague, I think it's absolutely crucial for people to understand where you're coming from, the limiting factors that you might be dealing with, because, you know, when that happens, they're in the best position to partner with you. And to vendors, I think it's the same thing. Like, hey, I don't need this particular product or service this time, or I do, or here's how you're meeting the mark, here's how you're missing the mark. So I think being transparent is crucial. I think the second thing is respect is a crucial element of trust, right? If I don't have respect for you, you know, that's going to be very difficult to trust somebody.
Yep.
Respect for, you know, the position they're in, respect for the challenges they're facing, just like common human decency. And then the third thing is understanding, right? So understanding where they're coming from, understanding how they're incented, how they operate, what the constraints of their business are. The fourth thing is service, right? We should be in service to one another. We should take a servant leader approach. We should always seek, like, how can I help you? How can I make things better? And when I have someone who's partnering with me or coming alongside of me with that type of an attitude, that goes a long way towards really solid trust. And the final element is time. Trust needs to be something that's repeatable and consistent over time. And the more time that I have with you, the more time that we've partnered together, whether it's through a friendship or professional collaboration, I'm going to have more and more trust. And so when I think about trust, those are some of the elements that I think about.
One of the things I've found is that a lot of startups have boards of directors primarily populated by operators with sales experience, marketing experience, in some cases product experience, or with investors, VCs, who are primarily coming from a finance background.
Right.
What advice would you want these investors, these board members, to be giving their leadership team and executive team around security and privacy? And what do you think from a board governance standpoint the board members should be almost demanding and mandating from their executive team, so that when they do end up at your desk and you're evaluating them, they're in a position where you could say, this is a good vendor from a security and privacy standpoint?
So I'll talk very strategically and I'll talk very tactically. So to begin very strategically, if you look at the track record of VCs, about 50% of their portfolio gets written off over the long term. They're just not successful. You'll have about 5 or 10% really hit it, like 10x, 20x, and then everything else is kind of mediocre. And I think the big part of that is, you know, respectfully, I think most VCs are just people that have money and they're not really former security operators.
Yeah.
So I think one, they're kind of just looking at it as like cybersecurity is hot. We can make a lot of money. So I would say strategically, I would encourage them to surround themselves with, you know, CISOs who have, or people who have operated as a CISO, who have entrepreneurial background, you know, experiences outside of just being a security leader, and leverage some of those folks to fill some of those board slots.
Yeah.
I think the second thing I would do tactically is, as you know, I'm a big fan of SBOM, software bill of materials. And right now, I think SBOM is at a place where the government's getting very interested in it. You know, as a CISO, one of the things that I do is, if I'm looking at a software vendor that, you know, processes, stores, or transmits PHI, I will ask for an SBOM. I don't always get it because, you know, as an industry, we're still evolving there. But I think that tactically, boards and VCs need to make sure that their security products that they're selling to the market are highly secure.
Yeah.
And, a basic way of doing that is to take a look at the SBOM, scan for vulnerabilities, making sure that they're not running into open source licensing conflicts or complications, making sure that they have some of the basic controls in place and basic governance in place. Because aside from features and pricing, there's no really good way that I know standardly that CISOs and organizations will evaluate software through. And if I can use an SBOM and I can compare one vulnerability management tool to scanner to another one, and I can see that the one has aging software and vulnerabilities and the other one doesn't, now that's actually a real way that I can take a look at and see, yes, this, vulnerability scanner X is superior to Y in these ways.
Yeah.
And I think when CISOs start to go down that path, not just with security software, but with software for the business, when they empower the business to know that they can ask for this through the procurement process, I think software is going to get more trustworthy out of the gate. Because right now, what you're relying on is essentially a spreadsheet or a questionnaire, even if it's automated, to answer a series of questions. And yeah, a lot of those questions will ask for evidence. Some of them will require like a SOC 2 or something like that. But I've seen companies with pristine, vendor security assessments and questionnaires come back with an SBOM that's riddled with problems. And so I think that that's going to be another dynamic by which we're able to ascertain risk. And if I'm a VC with a portfolio of companies, say I have 50 companies in my portfolio, I want to know where my risk is at technically.
Yeah.
I want to know when the next Log4j occurs at the click of a button, then I can see like, hey, here's where my risk resides and lies. And I think that SBOM will be the place where it goes. Now, on the flip side of that, we're going to have to make sure that legally, with that level of transparency, that there is some protection for the company, particularly if we're going to share it with vendors, because we don't want people to, nickel and dime companies over every single vulnerability.
Right.
We don't want VCs to nickel and dime their portfolio over every single vulnerability, because the reality of it is you could build a product, and if you're spending all your time trying to remediate the vulnerabilities, you might not be building features for customers that demand it. So it will need to be further defined. But I think that's, in my opinion, that's the direction the industry needs to go.
What's a better way to evaluate the security posture and the privacy posture of a company?
So I go back to, I'm a big fan of SBOM. So really the reason why I am is it's a machine readable format that I can, in theory, continuously verify. So I'm a big fan of continuous verification. We talk a lot about zero trust. I think in the GRC side, we should talk about continuous trust. I have this futuristic view of how security is going to work in 20 years, which is, every company is going to be listed on a trust exchange like the NASDAQ, right? And we will see trust go up and trust go down as events happen. As Log4j comes out, maybe this company, because they're using their stock price, if you will drop. If they invest in a new security tool, the futures will go up. And not that people will be buying and trading, although maybe, some people will figure a way to monetize it on, DraftKings or something. But, it's really this line that companies will operate, and we'll have an upper control limit and a lower control limit. And we're going to want to stay within that. And then when catastrophic things come out, it will drop it below an acceptable tolerance. When they go up, that's great. Although maybe there's some baloney going on there.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's also going to have to be the acceptance that we have of, yes, our vendors aren't perfect.
Yep.
And while I want an unqualified SOC 2 and I want zero vulnerabilities in their environment, if we're going to open up this level of trust and open up the kimono, so to speak, then you have to be willing to see some things that you're not super happy about. But when you weigh the reward against the risk, it's worth it.
I believe in mentor-backed entrepreneurship. A lot of people say you got to be a venture-backed company. I love to be a mentor-backed company because I love to have folks that are experienced, that have been there, done that, learned a lot, to be in my corner, helping me in my journey. Who is a CISO that you've looked up to, that you felt is a trust champion in their organization, where they're trying to elevate the idea of not just being a security professional or a privacy professional, but they're looking to elevate it to being a lot more rigorous, a lot more transparent, a lot more effective, and tying it to business impact? Who comes to mind in your CISO community of people of that kind?
Well, there's a lot of them, I would say. Nick Vigier over at Talon comes to mind. Gary Hayslip at SoftBank comes to mind. Andy Ellis, he's now at Orca and Wild Ventures. Sunil over at Jupiter One. I mean, I could go on and on. There's a ton of them, and I probably just offended some of them for not mentioning them. But I feel like people that operate with trust, they find each other because you'll see something they say at a conference or on LinkedIn or in a book that it just kind of resonates. You're like, yeah, that guy or that girl gets it. Like they're one of my people type of thing. But yeah, those are the folks that, to me really kind of just scream trust. Yep.
Who have you worked with on your team where you've looked at where they've motivated you to up your game? Because in some ways they've demanded of you that we have to do better.
I mean, I could list my whole team.
I love that.
I'll just name some first names because maybe they don't want to be called out. But Jessica, Nash, Mike, Fran, Dan, Joe, Emily, Tom, CJ, Laura, Dwight, Jake, Sivan, Grant, Mr. Wilson, all of them. And
I love it.
And then even folks that I worked with, when I was at Rally Health, I would not be where I'm at today. DJ Schleen's another one, Julio Jimenez, another one, the folks that we've worked with in the past. When you have trust with those people, and you agree to a common goal and common vision, and you execute on it and you make your business that much better. Listen, I would not be a 2-time CISO, right? Fancy title, Mr. Fancy CISO, right? Mr. Fancy, if it wasn't for my team, bottom line.
Well said. Well said. I love it. Dan, I'm going to say a phrase to you, and I want you to tell me what comes to mind as soon as you hear those words.
Okay. Ready? Yep. Go ahead.
Security questionnaires.
A little bit of dread, fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
If you could remember a situation where you had to deal with a breach, what food did you want to eat?
So for whatever reason, breaches seem to occur at 11 o'clock at night, or at least I find out about them at 11 o'clock at night. I would say my diet mainly goes to liquid, which is like drinking a lot of coffee, and then maybe like eating a protein bar or two. I'm one of the types of people that I get hyper focused on something. And when we're dealing with a breach, the world kind of fades away and I just deal with, incident response at that point, making sure we're asking the right questions, pulling in the right people, communicating the business the right way. And so, because I am very mission oriented, I will do what I need to do to stay alive and not much more. So it's probably not the healthiest choice. And, but that's kind of what I rely on from a food point of view when I deal with an incident.
At least when you said liquid, you said coffee and not any other type of liquid, Dan.
Well, yes, I need to have for an incident serious, I need to have all my faculties operating correctly. So,
Dan, you've been a phenomenal guest at Trust Talks. Thank you so much for taking the time with us and speaking to the audience. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.